We save approximately 28,000 tonnes of carbon emissions. That's the equivalent of powering about 50,000 households.
Wow. And we're live. Today we have with us Gurpreet Gujral, who's the Managing Director of Renewable Energy at the Atrato Group. Can you explain to people what you actually do as a Managing Director of Renewable Energy? Like, what does that actually mean?
So Atrato Onsite Energy is an investment trust listed on the London Stock Exchange. It is a renewable energy investment trust. We focus on investing in solar projects across the UK. The mandate is very simple. Strategy is to invest in solar PV projects that connect directly into corporates. The reason why that's important is when you have your electricity bill, whether it's you or a big company like Tesco's, they effectively have two parts of their electricity bill, the commodity cost and the non-commodity cost. The commodity cost is how much it costs to actually make the electricity. And in this country, it's the cost of gas. Okay, so gas determines the price of electricity in this country. And then you have a non-commodity cost, and that's everything else associated to obtaining electricity. And that's paying for the grid, paying for policy costs, paying for your supplier margins and things like that. What we do is we disintermediate the non-commodity cost. And so we install solar PV systems on rooftops of large Tesco supermarkets, big car manufacturers, aerospace businesses, heavy industry. And we might be on their roofs of big warehouses or big factories, or we might be in adjacent lands where we have PV systems that are basically installed right next to the factory, and then a private wire that goes straight in. And ultimately what we're doing is we're saving big corporates a lot of money on their electricity bill by just delivering them electricity through our PV systems. It's obviously clean, so there's a lot of green kudos that goes with it. But one of the key drivers, especially now in this kind of energy climate, is saving companies, which ultimately should feed into individuals who are buying stuff from these companies with lower bills. So that's the kind of mandate of the fund. It's pretty unique in the sense that most other renewable energy funds, whether it's run by Macquarie or BlackRock or Blackstone or 3i or whoever, tend to be more focused on very large grid-connected projects. So these are big solar farms or big wind farms or offshore wind farms. Whereas our focus is very niche in that we're focusing on those private wire installations, those on-site energy generation systems. So that's the fund, that's the mandate. The investment trust itself is essentially an SPV with no employees, it's just assets and money. I work for the investment advisory group called Atrato. Before I joined was essentially managing a real estate fund, and then I joined to set up the renewable energy franchise, which our first fund was the Onsite Energy Fund, which we IPO'd on the stock exchange in November 2021. I joined in January, spent the best part of 2021 building a team, building a strategy, going out meeting investors, and then launching the IPO, which we successfully completed at the end of the year.
What attracted you to the project in the first place? Like, why did you want to go into this renewable energy space?
So I've been in renewables right from the beginning, right? So ever since university, always in the sort of investment banking context. Worked for various different banks. Spent most of my career at a bank called Macquarie, which is a large Australian infrastructure specialist bank. Always worked within renewable energy.
Why renewable energy?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, it wasn't something that, when I was a kid, I was always dreaming about, right? Like it wasn't anything like that. I guess I started off being an equity analyst for a bank. My boss, this was basically a research analyst, and our job as a research analyst is to write publications on companies and giving investors recommendations on whether they should buy, sell, or hold a stock. And at the time, my boss asked me to sort of cover this really small at the time penny stock, and they made fuel cells. All right, and this is going back 15 years or so, and they had just IPO'd. It was a kind of a very much a startup business. I think at the time they had a core technology with good people, and they asked me to cover it. My first note, as the lead analyst, just a kid out of uni, published it, got a lot of traction. Suddenly realized that actually there weren't that many people covering renewable energy stocks. Like there was lots of people doing telcos, .com, lots of bank analysts, lots of other analysts. But actually the sort of alternative energy or renewable energy space, just there wasn't really anyone dedicated on it. And the firm that I worked for gave me the sort of, it's quite cliche and cheesy to say about the platform, right? They just said, go run with it. And, as a young analyst, if you get the chance to be the lead analyst, because normally you report up to someone who's the lead analyst and then you work your way up. They gave me the chance to just run with it. And then, I guess I just built a little a little franchise out of that. And then a few years ago, I got asked to move across to the kind of principal investment team at Macquarie, which is where they use the bank's balance sheet to invest and develop projects. So real assets. So not looking at stocks, but actually investing in real infrastructure projects, whether it's offshore wind farms, solar PV projects, energy from waste. Spent some time there, and then got talking to. I got introduced to Atrato. They had ambitions to set up their second fund. They didn't really, at that time, have a huge amount of experience in the renewable space because they were all kind of real estate folk, had built a fantastic fund, which is also listed in the real estate space. And, this particular niche I don't think was ever focused on by many of the big funds. So it just gave us a bit of an opening, and it was, it got a lot of traction when we went out and met investors. It resonated with folk, made a lot of sense. It's the world's easiest sell. You go to a corporate, you say to them, what's, from an energy perspective, what are the three key things that's bugging you from an energy perspective? It's the price, it's the volatility, and it's dirty, right? Mm-hmm. Our solution is really simple. We give you cheaper electricity that's at a fixed price, and it's clean.
Yeah.
So it's really simple.
So today, a lot more people are trying to get involved in renewable energy because climate is obviously much bigger a topic maybe than when you started your career, right?
Yeah.
So there's so many people listening right now maybe are thinking they want to make a difference somewhere in the climate tech space. They're trying to look at what the opportunities are, how do they get involved in that world. What advice do you have for somebody who maybe wants to get involved in climate, wants to get involved in this space, but maybe doesn't exactly know where they should go yet?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's such a big industry, right? You can get into the industry through so many different ways, whether it's from a finance perspective, whether it's from an engineering perspective, whether it's from project management. There's just so many different facets of the industry. The best advice that I could give, people always talk about it's not what you know, but who you know. That's it's what you know, right? It really is what you know. Forget about who you know, right? I mean, you're a kid coming through university. You're trying to break into the industry. Someone that you might know may open the door for you to get an interview or get through that door, but it's what you know, right? So it is about kind of understanding the content, understanding how it works. That doesn't mean that you have to get a degree in this subject. You can learn.
You did that, right? You did a master's, yeah.
I did a finance degree, and so it was very cliche kind of business type, finance. Stayed on uni to do a master's in a more kind of specialized finance degree. Started working, and then a new course, master's, opened up at Oxford in sustainability. It was the first cohort to join. Managed to get on the course. It was whilst I was working, so it was pretty neat, and work helped me out, with the fees and stuff. So, but I had already got, kind of a few years of experience in sustainability and renewable energy. But like I said, it's not about going to the right school. It's not about getting that degree in that specific space. You can learn so much without it. But you need to know the content, and it is one of those technical subject matters, right? So you do need to kind of to understand it. And when you understand something, then you can command presence in a conversation. You can solve problems because you've got the background, right? And you're not waiting for someone to give you the answer. So if you're coming into any industry, right, it doesn't matter if it's finance or renewable energy. It's just mastering it and understanding it and just spending time. Yeah. Just spending time learning it.
Yeah, it's a good point as well, because I think a lot of people might, for example, go for advocacy, right, where they talk about a subject or they try to encourage other people to do it. Mm-hmm. But like I said, if you've got that technical knowledge and scientific knowledge, you can make more of a direct impact yourself on in the industry, for example, right? Because what you're doing now, say, for example, by having those solar panels on those big supermarkets and those big car parks, then how much energy is being saved there that would normally be made in other ways, right? So that makes a huge impact because you've got that background where you're doing it through the industry, as opposed to maybe just going, like, for example, what you're doing today, right? You could be telling people to go and make change, but you're being part of the change yourself.
Yeah. No, that's a great. I'm really privileged to be part of that, right? Like being able to actually make an impact, and that's just through the support of the investors that we got, right? So we raised 150 million pounds in November. We had a really strong appetite. We could have raised a lot more. We maintained our position. We didn't want to raise too much money with investment trusts. the difference between a public investment trust and a private equity fund is that when you raise money from in the public markets, you actually receive the money.
Yeah.
So it's in your bank account, right? Always in the fund's bank account. It takes time to invest, and if that money is just sitting there, just not generating that much interest. Right now, it's generating a lot of interest because of the market, but back then, you're not earning much, and so we had to be pretty disciplined about that, and being able to deploy that money and invest that money, which we have now, into projects that actually is making a real difference. Is actually, and we track all of that, right? We track how many carbon emissions we're saving, what the equivalent is in terms of planting trees, and the numbers just getting bigger and bigger.
Can you give us some examples of some of those numbers?
Yeah, we save approximately 28,000 tons of carbon emissions. That's the equivalent of powering about 50,000 households.
Wow. Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. The Bay HQ has a podcast, but we're so much more than that. So if you want to find out about all of the events we've got going on, all the different ways you can meet each other, as well as resources to help you build the business of your dreams, then check out the link in the show notes, sign up to our newsletter, where you get a weekly roundup, which we like to call the Bay Letter, that will keep you in the loop. If you want to help us out, the best thing you can possibly do is sign up to our newsletter and share it with your friends. So that's enough from me now. Let's get back to the show. And obviously, the fund has been going only for a short time so far.
Yep.
What's the ambition? What impact do you want to make over time?
So yes, you're right. We launched in over 18 months ago now. We're now at a position where we've deployed and invested the capital. We've got a couple of big projects being built out and will be commissioned over the next few months. The ambition is to grow the fund. We think this genuinely has the capability of being a FTSE 250 business. We'll raise more capital, probably in the same kind of order, 100 to 150 million pounds. And then the cycle just turns again. So we then spend that money, invest that money, continue to build the portfolio, and then raise again and raise again. So over the course of the next 4 or 5 years, being above £1 billion of market cap is the target.
Obviously, that's a huge goal, right? But then you're on the path to doing that.
Yep.
And what have been some of the challenges that you said, when you went to go and raise capital, because so many people are interested in the climate right now? You said it was easy, but how is that being very modest, or what was? Well, look,
it wasn't. At the time, it wasn't easy, right? Yeah. Looking back, it was a good time to raise capital. The market in 2021 was very much a bull market, and so we did raise money at the top of the market. I think it's fair to say. At the time, it certainly wasn't easy. I think I met in the course of the roadshow, the IPO roadshow, maybe 80 to 90 investors in the space of 3 weeks, 2 weeks. Wow. Leading up to that, we're preparing a presentation which probably had about 60 to 70 turns, different iterations. You've got to manage accountants, you've got to manage the tax lawyers, you've got to manage the lawyers, you've got to manage your brokers. So and build a team and an infrastructure. So no, it was a hard slog. Having a really simple message, a really simple story that happens to fit the market at the time, and that's just luck, right? Helps. And just obviously having a really good team, like the Atrato team are fantastic. They've done it once before. They had a lot of track record with those same investors, which meant it was far easier reaching out to these same folk and kind of presenting a story, hearing their feedback, tweaking it, presenting it again, hearing their feedback. So from January through to I think August, we spent a lot of time fine-tuning the message, and then we went out in, I think, October, did 3 weeks and kind of doing 7-8 meetings a day, same thing, hour, same thing. All of it on Zoom and Teams. So no real face-to-face messages. So that was weird, but really efficient, because you could just, there was no time in between meetings. You just went straight to the next one. So it meant that we could cover a lot of ground. And now since then, I've been going around meeting everyone for the first time. So it's been great. It's the world's easiest sell. We say it as a bit of a joke, but it's not really. It ticks a lot of boxes, but one thing that it makes it very difficult is that what you're asking a corporate to do is commit to buying energy from your PV system for 20 years. And they're not used to that, right?
Big,
They're just not
yeah.
used to that, right? So there is a bit of a mind shift there. But some of the corporates that we've already engaged with, they're obviously progressive in their space. They understand it. It's made it. We eventually got there. So we deployed the capital, and now we go back.
So obviously in your role as managing director as well, because that's different. It's related to what you've done before, but it's going to be different in terms of the pressure and raising the fund. What's been the biggest challenge for you other than actually raising the capital itself?
There's lots of challenges every day. There's something that comes up, right? I mean, building the right team, super important. I've been really lucky with the people that we've hired. Some of the folk that I've known before, some new people that have joined. So that's super important to have that, because there's now about 10 of us, and we've all got our own kind of disciplines, and they've been fantastic. But finding those people is hard.
How did you find them?
So some of the folk I knew from previous experiences, worked with them before, been on transactions with them before, and some folk just through kind of normal interview processes, and so and you generally get a good feel for who's going to fit into the team. That's been hard, but been worked out okay for us. And then just building the infrastructure, right? So all of a sudden you're kind of running a public fund that requires a huge amount of process and a huge amount of set standards, because it's other people's money, right, that you're dealing with, and so having that plumbing in place beforehand is super important. That's been a challenge, but as I said, when I joined Atrato, they'd done it once before. They know how to do it, and so that kind of, again, really cliche, cheesy phrase, but that platform kind of helps, right? From not just from an investment perspective, but from a compliance perspective, from a HR perspective, from an ESG perspective, and all of that. So having that base is super important, because it could all go wrong, right? If you get one thing wrong from a compliance point of view, from a legal perspective. So you need to have that space or place to kind of allow you to grow.
Yeah, and like I said, like a lot of your clients are corporates, right?
Yeah.
Like large corporates.
Mm-hmm.
If there's people now who maybe are at those kind of companies, right, who are liking what you're doing,
yep,
and they're thinking maybe their company should be involved, or are you very specifically looking at certain times of business at the moment? So you said supermarkets, and I think you said car garages, right?
Car manufacturing facilities.
Factories,
So I mean, big factories. So we've got a project up in Sunderland right now, the Nissan factory. So we're putting 20 megawatts of solar PV systems. Nissan's factory up in Sunderland is one of the biggest in Europe, I think. We'll be energizing about 10% of that plant from our solar PV system. So anywhere where there is a huge amount of electricity consumption. So we don't tend to do offices or hotels, just because the space is not conducive, and the energy intensity within the space is not ideal. So we tend to focus on those bigger kind of drinks manufacturers, food and beverages businesses. And they consume a hell of a lot of electricity, right? Tesco's or Sainsbury's or Marks and Spencer's, they consume a lot of energy because they have chillers in place, and they've got big rooftop spaces, so it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And it's primarily UK focused at the moment, right?
Yeah, it's a UK Ireland fund. We had the mandate to go to OECD countries. We always said we'd start to think about that in year 2 or year 3. Fortunately, a lot of our customers in place right now have a presence out in Europe and other places. So we've started that dialogue. But again, it's just having the right team, right? You can't do that without having people in the market, in the location, and so that eventually will be our next step.
So would you say in some ways, like, you could expand faster than you are, but you're trying to do it through the right steps, because getting the right team in place first?
Yep.
Because I think a lot of people, for example, they think so much about expansion, but then they can then run into problems. And there's so many examples of this in the past, of where, say, for example, some of the supermarkets have tried to expand abroad, but they didn't have the local teams understood the market there, and they've then had to retreat and waste a lot of money.
Yep.
So is that something you're very consciously doing in terms of your planning?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe it's in the subconscious rather than something that's conscious. But we all have a finite bandwidth, right? And we're trying to build a fund here that's it is a permanent capital vehicle, right? So the fund itself is an investment trust. So the capital stays within the fund forever. If an investor wants to sell out, they sell their shares on the stock market, right? Just like any other stock. So the very nature of the fund is that it's a long-term, highly contracted fund. And what I mean by that is when we're selling electricity, we sell typically on a fixed basis. So we don't have the same level of exposure to the merchant curve. We call it the merchant curve. The merchant curve is basically the spot market, the wholesale energy market. And that's dictated by the gas price, which has nothing to do with solar PV, right? Yeah. So our goal was to create a fund that is not correlated or exposed in a significant way to the merchant curve, because we want to be out there for the long term. And it's the same for our growth strategy, right? Like, we want to grow. We're really, really aggressive, but we've got to do that in a really measured way.
Yeah, and obviously it's important, right? Because if you're using people's the funding you've got in place, then you don't want to just, we need to spend it. It's got to be used in the right way. And like you said there as well, that you wanted to deploy the capital in the first year, but it took a bit longer so you made sure that you used it in the right way. And obviously that's, at the end of the day, people rather use the money correctly and make a return for them, then
absolutely
you spend it quickly, right?
No, absolutely. That's one of the we're really lucky. We've got some really, really supportive shareholders. When we came back to the market after our first full year's results, we had to say to them, look, it's taking longer than we expected. A number of reasons, macro reasons, but also other reasons. And the investors said exactly that, right? We'd prefer you to spend the money sensibly than just invest it for the sake of it. And so that gave us the confidence to do that. And I think we invested everything by April. So it was all good.
And in the climate space generally as well, have you seen many organizations trying to help each other out? And what's that kind of system like? So let's say there's somebody else with an organization right now that's in the climate space. Do you see many collaborations, or how can that be fostered more?
As an investment advisor to a fund, you do get approached by lots of different organizations to sort of work together. And we do in some cases. It's just finding the right synergies. Yeah. It's really simple. It's just, there's got to be something in it for both. And we can't do everything, right? So like, we're very conscious about that. And sometimes there are ways to work with others. In general, I think the sort of climate or renewable energy industry in general could do probably a bit more, I'd say. Certainly from a technology perspective, I think in this country, we were one of the first, right, to really pioneer, particularly wind and offshore wind. But actually, if you think about the actual number of companies, British companies, kind of making wind turbines, there's not many at all. Yeah. I mean, it's really dominated. To be fair, it's really only dominated by 3 or 4 companies anyway. But this market was one of the first markets, and in this country we're blessed with a lot of wind, right? Like especially in the North Sea, and so it is a natural place for us, I think, here to do well. Now, there's other ways that you can do well, right? You don't actually have to be a British business to be supportive to the economy, right? Yeah. Businesses outside of the UK setting up a factory in the UK helps the economy, right? It's not the perfect way of doing things, but it does help. It's great for employment. It's great for clustering. It's great for a number of things. But I think what we could do better here is being more collaborative. And again, very cliche phrase, but when you are operating in clusters. Clusters being areas in the world or areas in a location where lots of businesses are set up. Like, this is a classic case of a cluster, right? Shoreditch, very creative, lots of people hanging out, talking to each other, working together. It's the City of London, the best example of a cluster, right? Yeah. Finance businesses and all the ancillary businesses around it working together, all within a square mile. We could do that, right? We could do that here in the UK with renewable energy, creating a cluster where you can innovate and you can work together, and that's the only way that you start an industry.
Yeah. So that's amazing, and we're going to need to move on to quick fire questions now because of timing. So first one: who are 3 British stations that you'd love to shout out that you think are doing incredible work?
Who I really sort of admire is the guys, what they're doing. The team out at Cal Said and Seek, the SWAT teams. that's just fantastic, right? Like I just think that brings our community up. It's so great to see young kids just out, doing seva, right? And it's not just about doing this sort of international humanitarian kind of work that CalSciAid have been so successful at doing, but also it's the local teams, whether it's in Ealing or in Covent Garden or in Victoria, you see young kids just helping out, and that's just brilliant. Whenever I see that, I think that's just fantastic, and we should all be doing that. But what it does do is it opens people's minds. The amount of times that I've sat on a tube where someone just sat next to me and just said, I know about you guys, or the amount of homeless people that have just stopped me and just said, thanks so much for what you've done, and I've done nothing, right? Like, but they see a Sikh with a turban, and they draw that link, and for me that's just fantastic.
And then the next question is, so if people listening right now want to either reach out to you for advice or find out more about what you're doing, where should they go to, or what can they ask you?
Yeah, look, I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the only social media thing that I'm on. So happy for anyone to reach out. At Atrato, we're trying to build our own initiative. That's to encourage females into STEM subjects. So something that we're slowly starting to build up, and I'd like to push that initiative this year, particularly. So particularly in that niche. So if there's anyone in that particular category that is interested in the STEM subjects that needs help, whether it's mentoring or otherwise, then please do reach out.
And then on the other side, is anything that you need help with right now that Atrato needs help with?
Yeah, it's just in our own hands, right? Like, I think we're doing okay. It's always great to hear from potential customers that have an energy need in what we do, and that's solving energy problems. So happy to hear from anyone in that space, particularly those in those kind of high energy intense businesses.
So thanks so much for coming on.
No worries.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much for listening. It means a huge amount to us, and we don't think you realise how important you are, because if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, if you leave us a 5-star review, it makes a world of difference. And if you believe in what we're trying to do here, to inspire, connect and guide the next generation of British Asians, if you do those things, you can help us achieve that mission, and you can help us make a bigger impact. And by doing that, it means we can get bigger guests, we can host more events, we can do more for the community. So you can play a huge part. So thank you so much for supporting us.